My dearest brothers and sisters, the channeler would like to share another story. Again, this story is fictional and written by the channeler. Tunia and I gave him some supportive energies, but the story is not channeled. That said, while this story is fiction, it is pretty close to the truth. I think this story is an excellent way to illustrate how reptilians act and think. It may also create some empathy in people for the pain that reptilians themselves go through when they are young. That said, this is a dark story that involves lots of heavy misogyny, because unfortunately most reptilians think and act in a misogynist way. This story involves trauma and violence as well as sexual violence. If you don't want to read or listen to this, I completely understand. In that case, feel free to skip this message. There is not any critical intel in this message. In past lives some of you have been reptilians, or have suffered at the hands of reptilians. I think this story may bring up some past life pain in some of you that could be healthy to observe and integrate, for those who have the capacity right now to do integration work. If you already feel overwhelmed, it is no problem to skip this. This is a bonus message, in the sense that this week I will have 2 messages, this one and a regular channeling. Also, next week we will go back to regular channelings. Your star brother, Hakann.
I broke out of my egg before the others did. I slowly gained awareness of a very big being looking at me. I instinctively recognized it as my mother. She was not satisfied. Her entire energy seemed to be unhappy with me. She was waiting on me to do something, to prove that I had value, to prove that I deserved life. I knew what she wanted. My body wanted to lie down and rest, but I forced it to move. I started pushing the other eggs out of the nest. I did not like the sound that they made when they splattered on the floor below, but as my brothers and sisters died, I did feel my mother's energy become more accepting of me. So I continued. And I continued. Eventually my work was done. I was panting and lied down. But the telepathic transmission of my mother shook me. Get up. You are not finished yet. She was right. I looked around and saw that one of my brothers had crawled out of his egg before I pushed the egg out of the nest. I took a deep breath and tried to bite his neck. He hissed and clawed at me. We started fighting, trying to kill each other, me to win our mother's approval and my brother just to survive. Eventually our mom smiled, took both of us in a separate hand and embraced us both. Bleeding, I could finally rest and enjoy my mother's approval. Well, I could enjoy my mother's approval for a time. As always, it only lasted so long before she became cold again, and I had to once again earn my right to life. Growing up, the lessons that I learned were simple. The first was that if I did not do what stronger reptilians told me, they would hurt me. The second lesson was how to hurt people, and how to kill. The third was that nothing was personal. When a reptilian forcibly took my breeding female, he didn't do that to hurt me specifically. He just happened to want intercourse, and she just happened to be nearby, and I just happened to be somewhere else. And that was it. It wasn't personal. It also wasn't personal when I murdered him afterwards. I did not even know him. All I knew was that my reputation would be ruined if I let someone have a go at my breeding female without killing him afterwards. So I did. I underwent the punishment for breaking order, and that was it. My reputation was restored. See? As I said, simple lessons. Life was simple back then. Everything up till this point made perfect sense to me. However, I still remember the first day that things stopped being logical. I'm not talking about when my mother accepted money so that the Greys could use me as they wished, for a certain period of time. That made sense. The strong always do as they will to the weak. That is just the nature of the universe. It is as things should be. What really did not make sense is that my brother freed me, accepting personal pain and cost in the process. And he did not seek to immediately use me or profit from me afterwards. Why would he do that? I almost felt angry at him for destabilizing the pristine and pure and logical world that I lived in. But to be completely honest, I was happy to be away from the Greys. What made even less sense is that as my mother died, she said nauseating words to me, and even apologized to me. Apparently the disease must have infected her brain. Still, I cannot deny that I felt something that day. I don't know quite how to describe it. It was not logical. My mother's illogical words continued to play over and over again in my mind. So I was happy when I got a new assignment. I could use the distraction. Apparently a man and his breeding female had been captured. They were from the pretender race, of the Pleiadian variety. My boss knew that all relevant information had already been squeezed out of them, but my boss's boss wanted to impress his boss, and so I had been ordered to make it look like I was interrogating them some more. At least for a time, until the attention of my boss's boss moved to other matters. After that, I could do with them as I wanted. Initially it was fun. It was always energetically energizing to make people suffer and drink their blood. Thriving off the suffering of the weak, such was our birthright. It is the natural order of the universe for the strong to do what they will, and the weak suffer as they must. This was logical. This made sense. What was less pleasing to me was that they both tried to protect the other, even if that meant more pain for themselves. This annoyed me. I guess it was to the man's credit that he had apparently trained the breeding female well enough that she was willing to sacrifice herself to spare him some pain. However, why would the male take on pain just to protect one lowly breeding female? Eventually the man expired and the breeding female screamed and cried for days. Her suffering was one of the most delicious energetic meals I ever had. And the male's body did not taste half bad either. That's what they get for thinking that the universe revolves around them. Us reptilians were here long before those pretenders. Then a portal opened. Before I could raise an alarm or wonder why security had apparently failed, I fell to the floor face down. I felt rage at the pretender who had captured me and was now sitting across from me. I felt rage that I could not move anything other than my face. But most of all, I felt rage at myself that I had been disabled that easily. If that pretender had fought me in a fair claw-to-hand fight, he would never have won. I would just have ripped him to shreds. But I guess it wouldn't have been logical for them to fight me that way, because my body was so very obviously superior to his. The pretender seemed angry too, and I felt some satisfaction that I had at least gotten the male. But no doubt the breeding female would be getting patched up right now. I shouldn't have played around with her so much and just eaten her. All right, the pretender said. As much as I do not like you, technically we are brothers, for we are both part of Source. He took a deep breath and continued, you are under arrest for torture, assault and murder. You have two choices. One is to defend yourself in court or let someone argue in court on your behalf, but I guarantee you that you will lose and will then be executed. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Both I and Hannah, the woman you brutalized, will testify against you. He paused. I unsuccessfully kept trying to move my limbs. Your other choice is to confront your own inner pain and inner darkness. If you truly do this and sincerely repent and change your ways, you will be allowed to live among us, as a citizen of the Galactic Confederation. Who knows, you might even be able to do something productive with your life. This path will be incredibly psychologically painful and difficult for you. However, succeed and you will live. I hissed. Well, I guess this was just one more situation in which more powerful people forced me to obey them. I had played this game before. And I guess this too wasn't personal. This pretender was just working for the interests of his clan, no doubt kept on a tight leash by his boss. When this pretender finally let his guard down, I would drink his blood too. And then I would find the breeding female and finish what I had started. That is not even a question, pretender. I choose to live. I wish they'd just beat me up, like civilized beings. Instead they had this technology. That would make me re-experience any so-called emotional pain and turmoil I had previously experienced. It wasn't so bad the first time. But when they kept applying it, especially aimed at my youth and my time with the Greys and my mother's death, it did begin to get grating. The first time that they sent some breeding female to offer her so-called healing services to me, I got furious. They must not even respect me enough to send me a male who was a so-called healer. But then it was back to one more round experiencing my mother's death, and that wasn't pleasant either. They were maddeningly vague with how often they were going to make me go through that. Until you feel your feelings, they said. What did that even mean? I pointed out their obvious logical fallacy: things that I am not feeling are by definition not feelings. However, they did not seem to care or even acknowledge that I had just proven my intellect to be superior to theirs. After they repeated their trick over and over and over and over, I finally had one embarrassing episode. I really tried very hard to escape that night, but failed again. The next day they were apparently happy to have humiliated me, so they went on to their next torture method. This time, they used their technology to make me experience what I had done to other beings. I chuckled when I first heard this. Wait, you're planning to flatter me and make me relive my greatest moments? You pretenders are not even trying anymore. That said, for some reason it became less and less fun to watch, every time they made me re-experience what I had done to others. It became downright uncomfortable when the Eaton male's family showed up. If they had just beaten me to a pulp, that would have been logical. It would have made sense. But somehow they insisted on sharing what they called their feelings, of how much they so-called loved that male, etc. When the breeding female healer came in again, I roared at her. She said that she would take that as another refusal or her services and told me good night. She was lying. I did not have a good night. I tried to free myself all night, again, but it was no use. The next day the family came back, and I wished these pretenders would have the decency to start beating me to a bloody pulp already. I really started disliking it when the breeding female whose male I had eaten, came to see me. At least I could see the anger in her. Which made sense. But again she and her family just talked to me. And her family seemed strangely supportive of each other. It was like her family was treating her like my brother had treated me. Neither of which were logical. My statements that things were or weren't logical, seemed to grow more hollow by the day. Somehow logic didn't seem to be the most important thing anymore. Eventually they started rolling me through their cities. They kept me paralyzed but able to see. It was unbelievable. If someone had described it to me before I got captured, I would have thought that they were on some kind of drugs. Breeding females seemed to be treated the same as males for some baffling reason. Males did not seem to claim breeding females, nor use force to keep these breeding females in their place. And yet somehow breeding females spent time with those males anyway, without being forced to. Everyone shared, without there being any trace of force or violence being used. People laughed openly, even though no one was suffering. People cooperated, without there being overseers who directed them. There were even some reptilians living among these pretenders, seemingly being treated as equals. I thought the 3 rules from my youth were simple. This way of living seemed even simpler. Everything just seemed to flow and happen effortlessly. This way of living almost seemed logical. When I got back, I had a truly embarrassing episode. But that night, I did finally allow the healer woman to start working with me. And that decision is what eventually led to me becoming a citizen of the Galactic Confederation. The end.